When you look at Chinese characters, all those intricate strokes and um, seemingly endless combinations, it's easy to think that learning to read them would be just incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it really does look complex visually, doesn't it?
Yeah, but here's a fascinating twist. Research is showing that specific reading support, well, it's actually making a big difference in helping Chinese children become strong readers.
Mhm.
It's an exciting area to explore, and today that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how these targeted approaches are tackling a writing system that's so different from, say, the English alphabet. The
Wow.
visual nature of Chinese presents, unique learning hurdles, and it seems these interventions are finding pretty effective ways to overcome them.
Right. And to really understand what works, we've got some great information to dig into. It's a comprehensive overview of a lot of research, 28 different studies, all pulled together and analyzed.
A meta-analysis.
Exactly. This big study, it's called Effectiveness of Reading Interventions on Literacy Skills for Chinese Children with and Without Dyslexia, a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. And it just came out in Educational Psychology Review last year, July 2024.
So instead of just looking at one or two studies, which can give you, a limited picture,
Uh-huh.
this research team took a step back. They looked at the combined findings from 49 different sets of results.
Wow, 49.
Yeah. And importantly, all of these came from studies designed to really fairly test whether an intervention was actually causing an improvement, these randomized controlled trials.
Okay.
So it gives us a much stronger sense of what's truly effective in helping young Chinese learners read.
Exactly. And for you listening, I mean, whether you're involved in teaching or maybe you have kids who are learning to read Chinese or you're just, curious about how different languages are learned,
Yeah.
this deep dive is going to give you some really valuable insights. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding a really important part of how kids develop reading skills. We're going to break down some surprising findings and hopefully make a complex topic much clearer.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, I mean, we're talking about a fundamental skill for millions and millions of children.
Absolutely.
Understanding the best ways to support their journey into reading this, visually rich and structurally complex language is just incredibly important for their future success.
So our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to understand the overall impact of this reading support for Chinese children and pinpoint the key things that make that support successful.
Right. What works and why?
Exactly. By the time we're done, you should have a much clearer idea of what truly helps young learners master this amazing writing system.
Okay, let's dive in. What did this big study find about how well these reading interventions work? Just in general.
Well, the main finding is really positive. Overall, the analysis showed that these reading interventions have a noticeable and meaningful positive effect on how well Chinese children learn to read.
In research terms, they found what's called a medium effect size, specifically a G of 0.68.
G equals 0.68.
Right.
And that means,
It basically indicates a clear step up in reading abilities for children who received support compared to those who didn't, like in control groups.
okay, a medium effect. So it's not a tiny difference, definitely significant, but it also suggests there's maybe room to learn more about making them even better, or that maybe things vary.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. While the general picture is encouraging, the researchers also found quite a bit of variation, heterogeneity, they call it,
Ah, right.
meaning the effectiveness wasn't the same across all the studies. Some approaches just had a bigger impact than others.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting as we start to, unpack what might be causing those differences.
And it seems one of the most significant things they found was around fluency training. What did the analysis show about that?
Yeah, fluency training really stood out. The research identified it as the most effective type of intervention they looked at. It showed a large positive effect size.
A large effect. How large?
The effect size G was 1.78.
Wow, 1.78. That's a considerable difference compared to the average of 0.68.
It really is a substantial impact.
So when we talk about fluency in reading, what does that actually mean? And what kind of activities are involved in this type of training?
So in reading, fluency is basically about being able to read smoothly and easily, without having to stop and struggle with each character.
Uh-huh.
It's about making that connection between seeing the character and knowing its pronunciation become almost automatic.
Okay.
The analysis highlighted techniques like accelerated reading, where text is shown briefly and then disappears, sort of pushing for faster recognition,
Right, I've seen things like that.
and also repeated reading, where children read the same passage or text several times to build up their speed and accuracy.
That makes sense. I mean, the more automatically you recognize the characters, the more your brain power is free to actually focus on understanding what you're reading.
Precisely. Cognitive load reduction.
Now, the researchers did point out something about the number of studies specifically on fluency, didn't they? A note of caution.
Yes, that's a really important point to keep in mind. While the results for fluency training were very impressive, GEOL 1.78, they were actually based on only a small number of studies within this specific meta-analysis.
How small?
Only 2 studies, contributing 3 effect sizes.
Ah, okay. So a limited evidence base within this particular review.
Exactly. So, while it looks very promising, and it certainly fits with what we know generally about how important fluency is in reading pretty much any language,
Mm-hmm.
the researchers suggest we should be a little cautious about drawing really firm conclusions just from this meta-analysis until we have more research, specifically looking at fluency training for Chinese children. More evidence would be really valuable here.
Agreed. Makes sense. Now, besides fluency, there were other types of interventions that showed, good, solid, positive effects, even if they weren't quite as large as that fluency number. Can you tell us about those?
Certainly. Yeah, several other methods showed significant medium effect sizes, meaning they definitely had a clear positive impact. First, there's working memory training.
Working memory. Okay.
That had a good effect size, GU.0.80. Working memory is, like our mental workspace.
Right.
It's what we use to hold and manipulate information in our minds for a short period.
Okay. And how does that relate specifically to reading Chinese?
Well, when a child is learning Chinese, they're often juggling a lot of visual information, all the different strokes of a character, trying to remember its sound, its meaning.
Uh-huh.
So having a good working memory to kind of keep track of all that is really important. This kind of training often involves activities that challenge both remembering spoken information and visual patterns, verbal and visual spatial tasks.
That makes a lot of sense. You can just imagine trying to piece together a complex character and needing to hold all those visual details in your mind while you do it. What else had a medium effect?
Next up is orthographic training. That also showed a good effect size, G equals 0.70.
Orthographic. So that's about the visual form of the characters.
Exactly. Orthographic basically refers to the visual structure of the writing system. So this type of training focuses on helping children understand how Chinese characters are built.
How so?
Things like the different radicals, the basic building blocks of characters,
Right, the compose.
where those radicals are located within a character, the positional aspects, and just the overall shape and structure. Because Chinese is such a visually complex script, understanding these patterns can really help with recognizing and, importantly, remembering characters.
So it's kind of teaching the underlying visual logic of the characters themselves. Okay, that seems crucial for Chinese. And what about the connection between the sounds of the language and the characters? Did training in that area help?
Yes, phonological training also had a significant medium effect. G was 0.69, very close to orthographic training.
Okay. And phonological is about?
Sound structure. So sensitivity to syllables, the individual sounds within syllables, especially important with pinyin, the romanization system often used to introduce pronunciation, and also awareness of the tones, which are, absolutely critical for meaning in Chinese.
Right.
And while the way sound connects to the written word is quite different in Chinese compared to alphabetic languages like English.
Yeah, it's not a direct sound-letter correspondence usually.
Right. But being aware of these sound elements still seems to help with pronunciation and maybe figuring out parts of new characters, particularly phonetic components.
Interesting. And finally, there was morphological training. What does that involve?
Right, morphological training. That had a medium effect as well. G equals 0.66.
Okay. And morphemes are?
The smallest parts of words that carry meaning. In Chinese, many single characters are also morphemes, and many words are formed by combining multiple characters or morphemes. So morphological training helps children understand parts of characters that give clues to their meaning. Those are semantic radicals, or sometimes clues to their pronunciation, phonetic radicals. It also helps them understand how these meaningful parts combine to form new words, and importantly, how to tell apart words that sound the same but have different meanings and different written forms, the homophones.
Which there are a lot of in Chinese.
A lot. So this is particularly relevant for Chinese because of that semantic transparency in many compound words and the whole homophone issue.
And how did that effect size compare, say, to similar training in English?
That's an interesting point. The researchers noted that this medium effect size for morphological training in Chinese might actually be relatively larger than what's typically found in studies on alphabetic languages.
Really? Why might that be?
Well, perhaps because morphology, understanding those meaningful character parts, plays a uniquely crucial role in deciphering Chinese text, maybe even more so than in English, where phonics is so central.
Fascinating. It really shows how the specifics of the writing system matter. Now, the analysis also looked at how these interventions impacted specific skills, right? Did they find a difference in how much they helped with, say, reading words versus spelling them?
They did, and this is quite interesting. They found that the interventions had a slightly stronger positive effect on word spelling compared to word reading.
Spelling more than reading, that's maybe not what you'd automatically assume.
No, maybe not. The effect size for spelling was G equals 0.93, which is
Sure.
quite large, whereas for word reading it was G equals 0.63, still medium but lower than spelling. And this difference was marginally significant.
Huh. Why might that be the case? Any ideas?
Well, one idea the paper touches on is that spelling in Chinese might rely even more heavily on a really detailed, explicit understanding of how characters are constructed. The individual strokes, the radicals, their exact placement.
You have to reproduce it from memory.
Exactly. And the connection to sound can be less direct or consistent than in alphabetic languages. So maybe these targeted interventions, which often break down character structure, just have a more noticeable impact on that more intricate production skill of spelling.
Okay.
Another possibility is simply that reading and spelling skills are just so closely linked, especially in the early stages. So improvements in understanding character structure, maybe driven by the intervention, naturally lead to perhaps even bigger gains in spelling when specific support is provided.
That makes sense. They reinforce each other. Now, what about the children themselves? Did these interventions have a different impact on children who typically struggle with reading, like those with dyslexia, compared to children who are developing reading skills more typically?
This is a really important finding, I think, with very positive implications. The analysis suggested that children with dyslexia seem to benefit more from these reading interventions than their peers who were developing typically.
Really?
Yes. The effect size for children with dyslexia was GeoFold's 0.87, which is a large effect. For typically developing children, it was G equals 0.49, a small to medium effect. And this difference was significant.
Wow, that's really encouraging for educators and, families of children with dyslexia. Why do you think that might be happening? Why the bigger benefit?
Well, one thought is simply that children with dyslexia often start with a bigger gap in their literacy skills. They have more room for improvement, you could say.
Right.
So when they receive targeted effective support, it might help them make more significant gains, maybe helping them catch up more dramatically compared to children who are already progressing closer to grade level.
So the interventions are providing them with fundamental tools and strategies that make a really crucial difference for their specific difficulties.
Potentially, yes. It could be that these interventions are addressing core deficits that are particularly pronounced in dyslexia.
Makes sense. And what about the age of the children when they got the support? Did starting earlier make a big difference in how well it worked?
Interestingly, no. The analysis looked at this, dividing studies based on whether the average age of the children was below or above 9 years old.
Okay, age 9 is a cutoff.
Right. And they found that the age group didn't significantly change how effective the interventions were overall. Younger kids and older kids seem to benefit similarly on average.
That is surprising, isn't it? Because you often hear so much about the critical importance of early intervention in reading.
It is a bit unexpected, yeah. And the researchers themselves noted that there's still a lot of ongoing discussion and debate in the reading research field about the optimal timing for interventions.
So it's not necessarily settled science.
Not entirely. While starting early is often advocated and can be beneficial for many reasons, like preventing difficulties from snowballing,
Uh-huh.
this finding suggests that older children, even above age 9, can still see significant gains from targeted support in Chinese reading. It's not necessarily too late.
Why might that be? Maybe older kids have other skills.
That's a possibility. It might be that they've developed other cognitive or learning skills by that age that help them engage with and benefit from the interventions effectively, even if they didn't receive that specific support earlier.
That's a really interesting point to consider. So the when might be less critical than just making sure the right kind of support is actually there when needed.
That could be one interpretation, yes.
Okay. Now, let's think about how these interventions were delivered. Did it matter if they were done in a group setting versus one-on-one?
Yes, it seems it did, though perhaps not dramatically. The analysis indicated that group interventions tended to be slightly or marginally significantly more effective than individual interventions.
Group was better.
Slightly better, yes. The effect size for group interventions was G equals 0.78, whereas for individual interventions it was G equals 0.45.
That's another finding that might seem a bit counterintuitive. Often we think of individual tailored instruction as being the ideal.
We often do, yes,
Hmm.
especially for struggling learners.
So why might group settings possibly be more beneficial here on average?
Well, there could be several reasons. In a group, you often have more consistent, unified instruction delivered to everyone at the same time.
Okay.
And there can be benefits from peer interaction. Kids might learn from hearing their classmates' answers or approaches,
Mm-hmm.
and they might be motivated by working together, a sort of positive peer pressure or shared learning environment.
Right, that social aspect.
Exactly. While individual support can obviously be very tailored to specific needs, it might sometimes miss out on those group dynamics or maybe even be less consistently implemented, depending on the instructor.
That makes sense. And the study also looked at who was actually providing the interventions, didn't it? Did the person delivering the support matter?
Absolutely, and this was actually a significant factor. The effectiveness of the interventions varied quite a bit depending on who was leading them.
Okay, so who came out on top?
Interventions led by the researchers themselves, G 0.85, or by teams that included researchers along with, say, teachers or others, GOs 1.11, were the most effective.
Wow, combined implementers had a really large effect.
Yes, though that was based on fewer studies. Teachers delivering the interventions on their own also showed good, significant effects. GOL 0.55.
Still a solid medium effect.
Definitely. However, when parents were the primary implementers of the intervention, the effect was much smaller,
Yeah.
G equals 0.27, and importantly, it was not statistically significant.
Okay. So parent-led interventions didn't show a clear benefit in this analysis.
Not on average, no.
That really highlights the importance of, well, training and expertise in delivering these kinds of specific reading interventions, doesn't it?
It really seems to. Researchers and trained teachers typically have specific knowledge and, pedagogical training in how children learn to read, literacy development, the best ways to teach these skills.
Right.
They're likely better equipped to understand the nuances of reading development in Chinese and to implement the intervention protocols effectively and consistently.
Whereas parents, while obviously hugely important in their children's overall learning and providing support,
Absolutely crucial.
they may not have that same specialized knowledge or training in delivering these quite specific, targeted reading intervention techniques.
Exactly. It's not about parents' willingness, but perhaps about the specific skill set needed for these structured programs.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, finally, the researchers also considered the quality of the research they were looking at and whether there might be any bias in, what kind of studies tend to get published. What did they find there?
Right. They did assess for potential publication bias. That's the concern, that studies showing positive or significant results might be more likely to get published than studies that find no effect or unclear results.
The file drawer problem.
Exactly. They used a couple of standard methods looking at a funnel plot and running Egger's test, and these tests did suggest that there might be some possibility of publication bias in this set of studies.
Okay, so maybe the overall effect is slightly inflated.
It's a possibility that needs to be acknowledged. However, they also did another check called a fail-safe N.
Fail-safe N.
Yeah, it basically estimates how many hypothetical, unpublished studies showing zero effect would be needed to overturn the overall significant finding.
Yeah.
And that number was quite large.
So it would take a lot of unpublished no-effect studies to make the overall positive result disappear.
Precisely. Which suggests that the overall positive findings are likely still pretty robust, despite the potential for some bias.
Okay, that's reassuring.
And they did one more thing, a sensitivity analysis. They reran the main analysis after removing some of the studies they had rated as being of lower methodological quality.
Man.
And the overall positive, significant results remained. The main conclusion still held up.
Okay, so that gives us more confidence in the general findings then.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests the core message is reliable.
That's good to know. So, okay, to try and bring everything together then, what are the most important things for us and for our listeners to remember from this deep dive into reading interventions for Chinese children?
Okay, the key takeaways, I'd say. First, the big picture is positive. In general, reading interventions do significantly help Chinese children improve their literacy skills. There's a clear medium effect overall.
Right. They work.
Second, fluency training seems to be particularly powerful, showing a large effect, although we do need more research specifically on this for Chinese learners.
The standout, but needs more data.
Exactly. Third, interventions focusing on working memory, understanding the visual structure of characters, orthography, phonological awareness, and understanding word parts, morphology, all show solid, significant, medium positive result. They're all valuable components.
Okay, those core cognitive and linguistic skills.
Fourth, interestingly, children who struggle with reading, those with dyslexia, seem to benefit even more from these interventions than typically developing kids.
Which is great news.
Definitely. Fifth, how it's delivered matters. Group settings tended to be slightly more effective than individual ones in this analysis. And sixth, who delivers it is crucial. Trained professionals, like researchers and teachers, achieve significantly better results than parents attempting to implement these specific programs. Expertise counts.
Right.
And maybe one last point. These interventions seem to boost not just reading, but also word spelling, perhaps even more so for spelling.
That's a really helpful summary. It really underscores both the challenge and complexity of learning to read Chinese, but also the real potential of targeted support to make a genuine difference.
Absolutely.
It leaves me thinking, given that different kids learn in different ways, and we've just heard that different types of interventions have varying degrees of effectiveness, and different factors influence that. How can educators and parents best figure out the specific kinds of literacy support that will work best for each individual Chinese child?
That is the crucial question, isn't it?
Yeah. It seems like really understanding these nuances, maybe assessing a child's specific profile of strengths and weaknesses, is key to tailoring the support effectively.
I think you're right. It really points towards the importance of assessment and personalized approaches in education. These findings strongly suggest that a one-size-fits-all approach to reading support probably isn't the most effective path. Further research into exactly that, how to better identify specific learning profiles and then match those profiles with the most beneficial intervention strategies could be incredibly valuable, moving beyond just what works on average to what works best for whom.
Absolutely. Well, if you found this deep dive valuable and maybe want to explore this topic further, we definitely encourage you to look into the original research or perhaps investigate some of the specific techniques used in the most effective interventions we discussed, like fluency or orthographic training.
There's certainly a lot more detail to discover.
For sure. Thanks so much for joining us for this insightful look into reading interventions for Chinese children.
My pleasure.